Isn't that crazy? 70% out of Canada. I would not have guessed that.
Now, that being said, the Canadian potassium is 40% potassium, 55% table salt, and 5% clay.
Also crazy. I'm like, wait a second. But if you think about it, what is table salt? NaCl, right? So what is even a salt? It's anything that readily disassociates in water into its
That's where you get that calcium chloride or the potassium
Cl
chloride.
minus, exactly. And that's potassium chloride. K plus, Cl minus. Boop.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Jug Dealers Podcast, all things cannabis and lifestyle related.
And powered by 5-8 Distribution. Thanks for coming out, folks.
Hell yeah, it's good to be back in studio. Today, we got a big one for you. It's our third in, our nutrient series as far as the macros. We're talking about potassium today, how it's processed, how it's been processed, really.
Sourcing of it, things like that. Yep, makes sense.
We're going to talk about the plant available forms. So as far as, potassium chloride, the other available forms that we use, monopotassium phosphate. We're going to talk about the natural forms as far as we always like to address.
And
we're going to address the gardeners.
100%. And really specifically, what does potassium do in the plant? We're going to spend a decent amount of time on that specifically. And deficiencies, which as gardeners is one of the things that's always asked, right? And especially when you talk about one of the macros, right? Yep. So we've done nitrogen, we've done phosphorus. Here we are on potassium.
Here we are on K. So when for anybody who doesn't know, and we're gonna cater to everybody, the NPK that you see on your jugs or your bags or whatever you're using, this is the K. So let's dive in. Let's get some of the chemistry and the science out of the way. So we're gonna let Jayhawk talk to us a little bit about that. Yeah. Let's dive in.
So, let's talk just a little bit about potassium in plants, right? First isolated from potash, which is the ashes of plants. It's part of where its name comes from. In the periodic table, it's one of the alkali metals, all of which the alkali metals have that single valence electron in the outer electron shell, which makes them incredibly reactive.
And like we were saying before, electron means, it's negatively charged particle.
Right. Well, and it's easily removed. Yes. Thank you. It is negatively charged. It is very easily removed, which then creates an ion. So
always trying to bond with other shit.
Right. So now it goes away, right? And now you've got, in this case, you've got K plus, right?
Yep.
Because it lost. So now it's positively charged. It was neutrally charged. That electron took off. And now here we are left with K plus.
I think in each one of these episodes, we end up talking about compost and stuff like that. And realistically, it's always been a holistic fertilizer. It's going to have your N's, your P's, and your K's. So
these things were done in history before people knew what was going on. Right? All they knew was this works to grow better plants.
Well, and I hate to say it, that's the way America was founded was you would use land until it was burned up, and then you would just move on. So that's how a lot of the United States was founded, until we actually started to develop some type of agricultural practices.
Well, right. Regenerative horticulture.
Yeah, we started talking about Liebig and stuff,
Right. Well, and looking at things as systems, right? Not just looking at them as a single source, and even like slash and burn techniques within the jungle and things like that.
I never thought about, and really, it's so funny because until we wrote this episode, I didn't really think about potassium being potash. Yeah. When you put it together, a lot of these names, they come from Latin foundations, and it's like, God,
and that's literally so you slashed it and you burned it, and now that was a source of potassium as that burned plant matter.
It's funny too, because it's not like these aren't things I haven't read, and definitely stuff I hadn't read when I was a lot younger, but I think as I'm older, it registers a lot more and resonates a little bit more. So hopefully the listeners feel the same way.
So I even remember when I was in school for horticulture, and just, it's kind of a lead in into what does potassium actually do in a plant, right? I remember it being like, okay, N does all this stuff. Okay, P does this stuff. Okay, potassium does so much.
All the
other stuff it does, right? It's literally essential in nearly all plant processes and need to stay.
And we're going to dive deeper into that in the episode, as far as getting into really a little bit more of the nooks and crannies.
Sure.
How how do we normally find it in nature?
How do we normally find it in nature? I mean, typically we're going to find it in more organic forms is the way you're going to find it in nature, or you're going to obviously find it very, 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 very deep in the ground.
And the mined rock powders. And that was actually something I found interesting as well is.
Or burn plant matter, I guess, potash. Again, slash and burn, right?
That's pretty much it. That was something I found was interesting was how much deeper you find it in the earth than phosphorus. Now that's not to say there aren't some strip mines, but most of the potassium that we use for plant fertilizer is pretty deep. How deep?
How deep? Can you move that up a little bit there, Grandma?
We're going to talk about that here in a second.
There we go. Perfect. Okay. So, obviously, again, just to list a few things, and I'll kind of start it off and then you can kind of rip through a few of these more. I mean, it's literally so many things, but hey, we're going to give it a little bit of a stab at, hey, what does potassium do? Okay. So this is actually kind of almost looking at it from a different point. It's saying, so plants deficient potassium are what, right? So they're less resistant to drought. They have bigger problems with excess water. They have bigger problems with high and low temperatures. A big part of that's because of that water movement through the plant.
It really helps that translocation.
Exactly. Keeping that turgor pressure, everything else. They're less resistant to pest diseases, nematode attacks. Because of potassium improves overall health of growing plants and helps them fight against disease, it is known as the quality nutrient.
The health element.
Which I kind of never heard it actually called that. When I was doing some reading, I was like, oh, the quality nutrient. And I found that really interesting. But again, going back to like what I was saying, it's used in so many different things. It's kind of like hard to even, define it. And it definitely affects, quality factors such as size, shape, color, vigor, of both seed, grain, flowers, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Not to mention a litany of other things.
I was going to say, look, one thing I thought that was really cool is it activates at least 60 enzymes involved in plant growth.
At least.
Builds cellulose, and it actually, what does that say? Reduces logging.
Lodging, which is a form of, that's basically a retard of plant growth, I believe, is like lodging. It's a very specific thing. You usually see it in agronomic crops, and it's just a weird plant growth. It's something, in fact, Rambo behind the mic there, can you pull up lodging?
Yeah, pull up the word lodging.
We're all going to learn together. This is what we're, playing with this. Oh, there you go. See? Lodging is the bending over of the stems near the ground level of grain crops. So what's happening is it's falling over.
Okay.
Right? And obviously that's a problem when you're growing a grain crop. You need that to be up and nice for pollination, obviously to be able to hold the grain, grow the grain, and then be able to harvest the grain.
Dude, I'll be honest with you. I had never even heard that word before. Like when I'm thinking lodging. I mean, so here's what registered in my head.
Lodgepole pines.
Well, no, here's, I'm either. So, we put these episodes together and we do a lot of work that goes in behind the scenes, but that was a note that got put in after the fact. And when I see lodging, I think to myself, like, where are we staying? So like,
yeah, funnily enough, Gabe, that was the first Google result.
It was actually the first time I looked at it.
Actually is in Denver. We have plant lodges where you can have your plants stay. Where else but Denver?
Of course. And again, there's a whole litany of other things, and we'll talk a little bit more specifically later. But moving on a little bit, let's really talk about how it's formed in nature, because we know it does all these crazy things for a plant. I mean, literally, again, even is involved in photosynthesis and production of proteins, and
opening and closing the stomata,
sugars,
all that stuff.
Movement of water, turgor pressure, all these things. But okay, great. How's it formed? Where is it formed? How do we get it?
So this was actually, for any of you who don't know, I spent years of my life doing masonry, so I'm kind of obsessed with stone, and this was actually a really fun part of the episode. This is a fun part of the episode to see, because I really wasn't sure what I was going to find, so
right.
Much like phosphorus, it is formed in the earth. Most of the stuff that we use for fertilizer is actually way deeper in the earth, and it's actually much older. So where I made the mistake in the phosphorus episode, and it was 20 million year old, not 20-year-old, but 20 million year old.
I mean, there's a slight difference.
This is actually 400 million years old.
400 million years old.
And so these are 400 million year old seabeds as well. So
I think you could definitively call that a finite resource, right?
Yeah.
So
very much so. Well, yeah. I mean, here's what's weird. Like, who knows how much of it there needs to be so much exploration to find it.
It's
labor intensive to get it.
You know what's interesting, Gabe? I don't hear as much talk, and I didn't even in the research as much talk like the years with phosphorus, where they like to make these predictions about phosphorus. We've got 20 more years or 50 more years or whatever. I didn't see that talk with potassium at all, and I'm not. And I don't necessarily even have any insight on that, but it was something that was kind of interesting.
When we talk phosphorus, we talk that really there is like 60 years worth, right. and we talk about the over fertilization of it. The conversation is definitely different when it comes to potassium. But anyway, I found that very interesting. It was definitely pretty interesting. So it's around 2,000 to 4,000 feet below the earth, at least most of the mines.
Bonkers.
There are some strip mines, but honestly, it didn't seem like that's what they're using for fertilizer. It occurs in many minerals like orthoclase, granites, hematite, and other igneous rocks. 70%. This I found pretty interesting and pretty, just wild to know. 70% of the world's potassium comes from Saskatchewan.
I would not have guessed that.
Now, that being said, the Canadian potassium is 40% potassium, 55% table salt, and 5% clay.
Also crazy. I'm like, wait a second. But if you think about what is table salt, NaCl, right?
Yep.
And so, and what is even a salt? It's anything that readily disassociates in water into its ionic form. That's where you get
that calcium chloride or the potassium
Cl
chloride.
minus, exactly.
Yep.
And that's potassium chloride. K plus, Cl minus, goes right together.
Yep. And it's interesting because we'll talk about this in the how it's processed part, but basically, and we'll get into how they separate all these elements. But let's get into the history a little bit. Basically, elemental potassium, it reacts vigorously with water. In the Bronze Age, people were using it for bleaching textiles and soap. The first sources really were from ash.
Yep.
And the ashes of land and sea plants. So they would burn these big piles of stuff and they'd have ash and they'd figure out, hey, we put it on plants and the plants are more vigorous. This is amazing. The first mines for potassium. So where we had our first mineral-based potassium was actually in Ethiopia in the 14th century, which is really cool. Ethiopia is like, when you go back in history and you read about Ethiopia, it's like
Fertile Crescent.
Birthplace of coffee. There's so much stuff really came out of there. If you really read as far as agriculture, it really is the birthplace of a lot of modern agriculture. Much of the potash until the 1800s was pretty much burnt wood that people used.
It's just charcoal, basically. Yeah, I mean, yeah. It's interesting to think that so much of it was, but again, we were burning a lot of wood. This is a time when you're talking about the industrial age. America is growing. All these other countries, Europe's going through all kinds of war and craziness. They're chopping down forests like they don't matter, they would burn that stuff like it didn't matter. Right? So it's like, why do you think they called Portland Stumptown? Yeah, because they literally cut down so many trees and it was so muddy and everything was so screwed up after they did that. You jump stump to stump to get across the street. Yeah, that's the crazy shit there.
It's wild when you go through the history. So by the early 20th century, we had declined in using wood and ash.
Makes sense.
And we had started looking in different spots around the world. Large scale production of potassium minerals, potash, started in Germany. In 1943, a large deposit was discovered in Saskatchewan. And then I think and here we are still today, right? I mean, it's still the biggest deposit in the world. They put out, I think in the stats, they put out 13 million tons a year. There's actually, when you look at the numbers, it's not, compared to some of the other minerals, there's not as much potassium.
It's macro, but not that macro.
But, it's really cool to see how it's done. You know, we have some images that Grambo was going to put up of the mine, but basically you go down that 2,000 to 4,000 feet. It's about 81 degrees down there. They have these,
which again was a crazy stat to me, right? Because you've gone past the cold zone. You're going towards the hot.
If you've never been inside the earth, it's generally
if you've never been inside the earth, let me tell you.
Well, caves,
Gabe Bezos over here.
A lot of like caves and stuff like that. Sure. That's
55 or something. Right?
I went to some caves in Thailand.
Sure.
So like they have right? And they're generally subterranean level is 55 degrees. I mean, so we'll dumb it down a little bit. Even a basement. A basement is inside the earth, you know, and again,
so I have been
below. So like there's a place in Australia. There's a place in Australia called Coober Pedy. And they all live in the earth, and because it's just so hot outside, it's like 130 degrees, like all the time. And they're like, yeah, because they're surrounded in earth, it's 55 degrees. But these mines go past that, so it's 81 degrees. One thing that was kind of interesting is they have almost underground highways. They have. Where they do the mining, all of a sudden they become these underground machine shops.
Totally. Well, it's just like a limestone mine, although obviously much, much deeper.
Yeah, but it's crazy what a big operation it is. I mean, if you want to see, there's cool videos on it. The company that is the largest, both potassium and phosphorus mines in the world is a company called Nutrien. And they have that's actually where I saw a bunch of this stuff. You're welcome to go check it out. We are purely just relaying information. But it is cool to see. So after it goes through the mining process, they have these big kind of boring machines. They send it into the elevators that go 400 feet a minute up to the surface, much like the phosphorus production. They end up turning it into a slurry process.
Scrape that top, right?
Yep. They actually, when it comes to the surface, it's crushed and milled. They separate it into 3 different sizes. And then after they separate it into 3 different sizes, they put it in a brine solution and they start mixing it and they kind of air and train it. And same thing. The finest kind of rises to the top with the salt. They go through another process where they actually separate the salt. And then they actually put it in centrifuges. When they put it in centrifuges, that pulls, I think, the last of the clay out. Makes sense. Then after it pulls that clay out, they heat it, and then they actually go through and they mill it again. And as we discuss many, many times on the show, and just when you see us out in the field, what happened 400 million years ago influences the flavor, and what happened in the milling process and the size of the particles, regardless of whose nutrient you use New Millennium, use Canna, use whoever. We're talking about particle sizes you can't see. So the fact that ours may be a little bit cloudier than someone else's, dirt is not clear. And plants don't care about, we're talking about microscopic levels here.
Well, right. I mean, in plants and clean, evolutionary speaking, those things never went together. Yeah, protozoa, bacteria, other single-celled organisms came up right along with plants, and things like that were here before us and will be here long after us. I can promise you that. Again, we're heterotrophs, they're autotrophs, right? One of the things that, we were talking about even last time around when it came to speaking about light, you know what I mean? And really looking at light as, all these minerals and things are looked at as food, but really it's structure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
They're vitamins. They're helping out. But the quality of it, like
building blocks,
if they're going to be vitamins, same thing. The quality of your vitamins, the quality of where you source these things, the quality. I think we can all
quality
agree.
counts. I think everybody can agree with that.
The inputs are going to dictate what you get out.
Yeah. Look, we've said it for a long time, fire in, fire out, right? And that whether you're talking about hash making, whether you're talking about cannabis production, whether you're talking about anything, whether you're talking about freaking pottery, you know what I mean? It's like you have to put a good product in to get it out. If you put in shitty clay, it's going to blow up in the kiln. Don't ask me where I came up with that. I'm just...
Hey, man, go spend the extra money and ride a good snowboard with a nice pair of boots. All of a sudden, you'll be like, wow, I got a lot better at snowboarding real fast.
I mean,
you know?
You see that view from the Cosmo and you never want to look at Vegas another way. You see something good and it just works.
Hey, Grambo, you mind just sliding that up a little bit? Thank you.
But the 3 places it's from, Russia never surprises me. Why? It's so vast, right?
Yep.
And just knowing that they are heavily involved in mining operations. And not only if you look at, really the USSR, if you really took all that in.
It's a big country.
Well, and if you think about the territory that it once was and how much mining is done within that territory, right? Mm-hmm. Pretty wild. So Russia never surprised me. And I guess Belarus would make that sense too, being in Eastern Europe, right? But Saskatchewan, that one definitely threw me off.
The fact that it produces so much is what kind of blew my mind. Now, obviously, I think you're seeing a lot more of that potassium chloride, and we'll get into the 3 forms in a little bit that we use for plant sourcing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
but it's definitely interesting to see. The other ones that were interesting to see on the list was we got China, Israel, Germany, Chile, USA, Jordan, Spain, and the UK. Yeah.
I guess so. Again, ancient seabeds, right? So maybe but you almost have to think about it like that for that to make sense. And even for that spread, if you think about that spread across the world, basically nearly everywhere you can find evidence of a seabed at some point in time.
Seabed,
you know what I mean?
Now here's one that really kind of blew my mind. I discussed how the Canadian potassium was 40%. The purest mines in the world are at 80 and 90%, and they're actually in New Mexico and Michigan. So that's, and again, you go back to that quality about, who's got which and what. And obviously, if it's a New Mexican mine and it's not one of these big companies, that's going to be a smaller source of potassium that maybe, a lot of these bigger ag companies aren't. I had this discussion the other day with someone. I may need to have Grambo pull it up, and I should have said something before the episode, but I'm thinking about it now. And it's like, we talk about, and you actually might know off your head, what the cannabis number in nutrient is versus what the worldwide number of nutrient sales is for big agriculture. And I want to say it's like 20 billion in agriculture and like 100 million in cannabis.
I was going to say less than 1%.
Yeah. Well, we're such and I know we think that we're a big part of it, but that's really, honestly, that's why sourcing matters. And that's why we always talk about that with New Millennium, is because the sourcing, where you get your potassium, the process it went through, whether it's monopotassium phosphate or potassium sulfate or potassium chloride, in which that's the cheapest one of all of them. But it also, look at the process it went through, as far as, like, think about the milling process it goes through. If it's a 40% versus an 80 or a 90%, it's already cut.
You got to get rid of a lot of stuff. You got to get rid of a lot of stuff. You know what I mean? And so, no, I think sourcing does matter. And it's also very interesting when you talk about, there's really only a few places in the world that things actually come from. I think this right here proves that pretty quickly and pretty easily, that the bulk of the potassium only comes out of a few places.
Well, and this is what we want people to think about. This was almost, I hate to say it, this is almost what drove the entire show, was that we're out here trying to get people to think about these things, because honestly, when we looked around, that seemed to be the big gap. That's why I came to work for New Millennium, because I wanted to know. All right, we got dinosaurs on the bottles.
Right. And the reality is, it's just, wanting to open people's minds a little bit, and also understand there's a little bit different way to do things. And we are very quality driven, whether it's, the lighting, whether it's New Millennium, whether it's, Scietetics and kind of that foray more directly into commercial production and things that are going to work well in that regard. That's where our advantage lies, is that we have the tools and we've got, we've got everything available to us. And that's what's kind of wild too, right? Is I started looking at it, and when we talk about how important is potassium, there's only 2 bottles in the line that don't have it in there. That's it. Yeah. Literally every other piece of line has some potassium in there, just to give you an idea of really, truly how important and how vast that is.
Well, I think what's funny for us too, and Like,
Equinox and Fulvic just and Ruby just in case.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's another.
I think what's funny for us and getting down to the, we were never just jug dealers. Like
No.
we've always been the dudes like, dude, I've been cultivating since 1996. You know what I mean? And hustling since before that.
Sure.
So like,
Usually
and not for nothing, when I started growing in 1996, I was all about the organic, heady, like that's how I wanted it to be, and then then I realized that like, man, that's really hard. Like you got to really know what you're doing, and you have to understand that different elements break down at different, like we said I think on the last episode or the first episode, how chicken manure and cow manure break down at different rates, and chicken manure is nitrogen 2 months out.
Right.
So like all this stuff matters. And meanwhile, for hundreds of years, people had to figure this out on their own.
Totally. And it was all basically done anecdotally, and I thought the same thing too. And I came out of horticultural school with my ideas about organic production and but I quickly realized that it's not that it's not a way, but maybe it wasn't the way for me.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the way for me, it's a meeting of the minds. It's that availability with that residual quality. Right. And that to me is that meeting
that
of
synganic.
That synganic. I mean, I find it to be the best of both worlds,
dude. Salt's pumped, dude. Nobody can, but you gotta love the flavor of the organic. So yeah, putting in right. a little mixed spectrum.
So
helps.
Speaking of organics, we obviously know the natural forms of potassium, which we've already mentioned: mine rock, manure, wood ash, primarily.
Yep.
Nothing crazy there. And even when it comes to deficiencies,
shout out to the organic homies.
Yeah,
we love you.
Yeah, we love
you.
The deficiencies, again, kind of random, right? And it's almost one of those things where, and this will actually be a whole show that we'll do, like signs versus symptoms one point in time. Really
Dude,
looking at deficiencies.
I have a great book on that too.
And looking at deficiencies is looking at symptoms. That's what's already happened. So really, I don't like looking at that and looking at trying to fix problems by looking at symptoms, because that's not the way to do it. It should be signs over symptoms. We'll do that a whole other show. But in general, weak stems, floppy leaves, discolored leaves, scorching along the edge of leaves, shitty looking plants.
Which makes sense with the water transport throughout the plant. That makes complete sense. Same thing with the opening and the closing of the stomata, all that
Absolutely.
stuff.
And it was another thing, and we'd like to mention, it is a mobile nutrient. Okay. And I know that, sometimes it's easy to get mixed up. So for all you, just to remind you, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, and sulfur are the mobile nutrients.
Yep.
And so
what does that mean, Jayhawk, for everybody who doesn't know?
That's a plant that it can actually translocate within the plant, right? So if you have
move from the bottom to the top if it needs it.
Right? So it'll go to those growing areas. It'll go up to the merostems. It'll go up to that area of newest growth if needed.
So you'll see a deficiency at the bottom of the plant, as opposed to, let's say, iron, in which you'll see the deficiency
exactly.
So, and that's honestly, that's the easiest way to remember things. As far as, and it's funny because mag is like kind of mobile. So like you'll see a lot of mag deficiencies in the mid range of the plant. Weird. Like it's not, and it's funny because I said something to Ernie at HTG, shout out to Ernie. And I made a mistake in saying that, that calcium was mobile. And he's like, no, it's not. And I was like,
I've also made that mistake.
I was like, and I went and argued it, and then I looked it up, and I was like, oh yeah, I fucked up.
It's a secondary messenger in the plant. The fact that it's Ca2 plus Ca3 plus, much like iron, it's how plant communicates with itself. But as far as translocating within the plant, no. Okay, so to wrap all this up, why the hell does potassium matter? Let's just run through these again, right?
What it does, man, it does so much.
It does so much. Contributes to the quality of the flower. It's a catalyst for carbohydrate metabolism. It's the only essential element that isn't a structural part of the plant. I found that to be interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
I had never made that.
Well, when you look at like how phosphorus helps the cell wall form and stuff like that, and what the other ones do, and this one being a macro, what it doesn't do on that respect, but it still helps
all the water movement. I think that's probably one of the biggest things.
And again, the regulating 60 different enzymes. That was crazy. Well, and the thing we need to understand is when you go down to that cellular level, and you understand that there's all these, there's 4 different protein pumps in a cell that are moving all these different proteins, and this is an important part of regulating all that.
Yep. Yep. Again, potassium ions play a key part for movement of HCO in and out of the cell, specifically the opening and closing of stomata. I think that's and it really is specific to those guard cells. It's got these two guard cells around it that will fill up or deflate depending on whether it wants to be open or closed.
And for people who don't understand, stomata is how your plant breathes. So, and how your plant breathes is going to be how it eats. Because
it's a one-way system, right? So if so let's say you got a plant that's starving for water, so it's shut up at stomata. Now it can't drink, right? Because it's a one-way track. It comes from the roots all the way up and then out of the leaves, which is exactly why if you were to go in, Gabe, how would you size let's just say a dehumidifier in a room? Where would you go look to see how many liters you need to be able to take out of the air?
Well, you look at how much you're feeding your plants.
Oh, okay.
Why'd you put me on the spot like that? Come on now.
So again, but that's something I don't think a lot of people think about that. Oh, holy crap.
Gallon in, gallon out, baby.
A plant doesn't drink anything. It passes water through its system.
Yep.
It takes it in as a liquid and passes it back out as a gas. That's why a terrarium works, right?
I always kind of use the shorthand. I always looked at it like it was the plant's blood. Is that an apt analogy?
No, it's really kind of, but no. I mean, it moves up through the xylem. It moves up through the dead plant cells in the middle of the stem. You've got the phloem on the outside. And you have the cambium layer between it, right? And that's cambium layers is the growing layer. And like when you're cloning and things like that, that's what you're trying to get down to, that nice little layer. But it's a very thin layer. So, I mean, in a way it is, Grambo, but the way it then passes out, blood stays within you. It doesn't stay within it.
Obviously, we don't have a blood stomata pumping out. But I just looked at it. It's not something that they're like doing. It's like it's pumping things around.
And in the same way that blood delivers different nutrients to our cells and things like that. 100% water is what is the delivery, what's
Jared saying I'm only half stupid. Thanks, Jared.
Yeah, well, I'm trying here. But anyway, this is something interesting to think about. Again, it is a cation, so things like H+. So when you have those proton pumps, it's very easily brought in. It's exchange.
It's going to want to bond. It
sits on in anything that has a nice cation exchange capacity within the substrate. It holds in really, really well. Again, parting words. What's awesome about potassium?
Everything.
So,
just make sure you're getting that good K, folks.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to. Make sure you're getting that good K.
Hey, well, okay, on to current events in cannabis.
You know.
If you know, you know. Hey, look, if you were at the Sphere. Anyway, current events in cannabis, which we did come up with a couple things this time around.
Well, I was going to say, let's make Colorado. Let's talk about Colorado first.
Down a little bit, would you, Grandpa?
Because we had Jared Polis,
which I didn't
talking about. And this is actually, I'll be honest with you. This goes along with maybe what I was talking about as far as the 25 states then being obligated to
we discussed that.
Yeah. And this goes along with that, where now that we've reached 24 states that have it written into their constitution are kind of obligated. And that's what Jared look, man, I love that dude. I really do, man. I think he's awesome. I think what he's done for the state is awesome. And I think the fact that he's out there being like, hey, we need to take a look at this.
Well, and to be clear, he's taken the torch. I did think, people can say what they want about Hickenlooper or whatever. He was here when it went legal. But the one thing I like that he said is, well, I may not be into it, but the people have spoken. So it's my job as an elected leader to make it happen.
Again, I don't want to see people get arrested anymore. That's my big thing.
Well, right. I mean, let's be real. Come on. Like it's not, it's like, I mean, we go all over the world now with this stuff, and it's like, it almost seems unbelievable where it was at one point in time.
Oh yeah. I mean, last episode I wore the tie terp shirt. By the way, shout out to Brett, the homie, Mary's Motivation. I meant to shout him out at the end of the episode last time, but I forgot.
Hey, but either way, you didn't forget. You just postponed it.
I just postponed it.
That's fine.
But it is interesting to see it all over the world. I'm glad to see us making some strides, in in a related way, but unrelated way to that story, you know, we had reported before that Ohio had legalized, but now they're trying to backtrack a little bit.
So two things. They did have a bill that was introduced that definitely tried to kibosh home grow before legalization even started.
Which is like the birth of home grow on the East Coast, man.
Which a lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, dude, you were getting, I'll tell you right now, like if anybody who's a Grateful Dead fan who was going to Buckeye,
they went to
who was going to Buckeye Lake back in the early 90s. I don't know that the Death Star existed back then, but I know the Ohio Death Star has got to be one of the best cuts ever.
If anybody's got the Death Star out there,
dude, I'll take it. That has got to be,
just, you know, a little call to action there.
It's a shame. Yeah, if I could say that would be my strain talk of the day, because that actually,
but we don't have it, so we can't.
Yeah, that at the time was like, dude, that is the best flower.
Oh my god! Okay.
Oh, so good.
You threw me off completely. But so from what I did understand, and not to cut you off,
no.
I do have some peeps. Shout out to my peeps in Ohio. I guess they have turned back around and basically said, okay, no, we're going to go through with this, whatever.
Nah.
But look, I'll tell you right now, if they've already had some tomfoolery that's been happening, don't think it's not coming back.
Dude, that'd be like banning swimming in Florida. Like it's just you ain't putting the genie back in that bottle.
No, and I mean, I think we said that too. It's like, how are you going to stuff that cat back in the cage?
Yeah, no,
you know,
it's
we said this in Colorado years ago too. We're like, bro, you let us, like, we're not going back now. You know what I mean? This is, and again, to your
Genie's
point,
out of the bottle.
We're 25 states in. Pretty incredible.
Well, 24, but we got one more and we're 25. But
correct.
Still,
and
you talk about medical. I can't remember what the medical number is, but we're in the 30s.
Yeah, it's like 42, depending on how you count it. Some of the less than 3% states.
Idaho, Wyoming, someone just posted something about Alabama. I think Alabama. Yeah, I think Alabama's trying to make some moves. So really, it's just that. Scary states. I love Idaho too, man. Idaho, can you please straighten out your stuff so we can smoke some legal weed up there? It's beautiful.
I like it up there.
I hate to say it, man. That's where I used to run the border up there from Canada, and that's the spot, baby.
A couple summers ago, we went up and hit the gorge, and then popped over to Coeur d'Alene and hung out and got on the Coeur d'Alene River. And that is pretty country.
I used to hang out in like Loxa Lodge, the most. I don't even want to tell anybody the name of the most beautiful hot spring in the world, but it's just north of Salmon, Idaho, and it's absolutely beautiful. If you really, really, really care, and you feel like driving 12 hours and you want to reach out to Grandpa, I'll tell you. But
reach out.
But
that's the super secret.
Only if you've got the balls. Okay, so not a ton of current events in cannabis, but again, something we wanted to chat
we just
about.
want to keep people
kind of going on that. Let's get into the strain talk. And that's something, obviously, first and foremost, of course, we're going to talk about it here, but where are you going to go see it? On Instagram.
On IG, baby.
So go check out the Jug Dealers. We will be posting up anything that's, let's just say, 18 and over content. That's where you're going to want to find that. And never be afraid to share these videos, folks. It definitely helps us out a lot. So, Gary Payton, why don't you talk to us a little bit about that?
Dude, so Gary Payton, I've been really digging growing. It's a Little Cookies Powers Up collab. It's the Y and Snowman. You know,
two infamous strains. Infamous strains.
Yeah, it's a banger. I've been doing it NewMill, Apex UV, super greasy. I'm really excited because this run is going for BHO. So, greasy
terps, BHO. What's your feeling?
Like just
more sandy or greasier? What's better?
Greasier. And it's more of that, like that old school. I want to say
better for water extraction.
Sandy's better for water extraction. Yeah. I mean, and this is, look, this is the stuff that doesn't wash, man. Don't get me wrong. It makes great bubble. It makes great rosin. It's just, you're not getting numbers that make it viable unless you're going out and charging crazy money. Whereas butane, it actually still, that's a constituent that it still hangs with pretty well. So I'm pretty excited about it. We're just, I actually did this is actually cool. And this is funny. So per listening to some of our listeners and how they do things, this round, I actually started adding, I'm at day like 45. So I started adding 5 mils of winter frost to my feed. Per end users, man. Like
that's
we've had some people reach out and say that's something they do. So I was like, all right, well, let's see what we can do. I haven't seen much color change yet, but it definitely seems to be greasing up. Like I'm the type of guy who goes through with a scope every day. And I'm like looking at the trike heads because I just really.
You look like the type of guy that knows you're an oil farmer.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it, but yeah, no. I mean, being as I don't have I'm not with the MSOs right now, so I don't have to adhere to anybody's schedule. But I'm looking at the heads, and one thing I've talked to Bill about is really if you're harvesting just for oil, do you really how much of a flush do you need? Because ultimately you're trying to get the salts out of the plant material. The salts they're not in the heads. They're not in the oil. That's all done. So in that case, if you're just harvesting for oil, you can really kind of run things hard until you get to a point and then slam it off early. Yeah. Slam it with the winter frost for 2 days. And then just pull it 2-3 days of hard winter frost and then just pull it,
Yep.
So
yeah. Which I know we're going to have some good shots of the Gary Payton up there.
Yeah. I was waiting for it to get a little more color.
We just got to get a little more color.
It's a little boring.
Yeah, don't worry. So,
I don't want to say it's boring, but it's not, I love when it gets those dark colors.
It doesn't matter because again, the 18 plus content is posted later anyway.
Yeah.
So we're good. It's totally fine.
Let's talk about some suggested reading for the home.
Well, yeah. And I will mention just very quickly, this is normally where we'd have our travel portion, but we already talked about Vegas on the last episode, and it is December, so we're kind of just chilling. So we'll pick up that section, come January. But let's talk about our suggested reading to finish out the trilogy.
Mr. Jeff,
seeming how we were doing the trilogy of the macros, teaming with fungi. I think that was somewhat predictable. Of course, we'll pop up a picture of it. Almost every plant in the garden forms a relationship with fungi. With many plants would not exist without their fungal partners. By better understanding this relationship, home gardeners can take advantage of the benefits of fungi, which include an increased uptake in nutrients, which people are pretty familiar with when it comes to mycorrhizal fungi.
Unless they're using hypochlorous acid.
Well, that's for another episode. Resistance to drought, early fruiting, and more. This must-have guide will teach you how fungi interacts with plants and how to best employ them in your home garden. I think this is one of the most exciting areas and you can't even call it the plant world because fungi is not a plant. In fact, it's more animal than plant. It's a decomposer. It does not photosynthesize. It is like humans. It is a heterotroph. It's not an autotroph. It needs to go find its food. So yet it can't move, right? Oh, whoa, hold on a second. Yes, it can. Just maybe not in the traditional sense of walking on two legs.
Right. Some people think in science that it might be an alien, like with panspermia, where some things travel on asteroids, planet to planet. It's so foreign to our ecosystem and all the weird things that the Slicium cubensis do. Some people think it's an alien. I don't know. That's pretty mobile.
So, and of course, every time we talk about mushrooms here on the show, we also like to shout out Sacred 3 Mushrooms and our boys over there at Fruity Spores as well. What was the discount code again?
Buddy. It was JDP10. Jug Dealers Podcast 10.
JDP10. Go see those guys. Great people over there. Great genetics. I can attest to myself. The personal fable kit is phenomenal. The videos, the customer service, everything. So when we talk mushrooms, we talk Sacred 3. But again, these are things, and shout out to Paul Stamets as well. I actually have another a good friend of mine, Drew, who's got a documentary that'll be coming out on fungi. These are areas that, man, we are just now beginning to not even understand, but scratch the surface of.
There's so much to know. There's so much to know.
And you know what? Shout out. Somebody did have an answer that we asked. Remember, we asked a number of actual species of mushrooms. Somebody did answer that in the comments. So thank you for that interaction.
It was like 20,000.
Yeah, I believe that. There's 5,000 types of ferns. Of course, there's 20,000 types of mushrooms.
All right. Look at this guy. Super unimpressed. What a dick.
20,000 types of mushrooms. Like, Dude, I've seen mushrooms where like there's definitely mushrooms I've always seen once in my life.
Oh,
mushrooms that were like
might have only come out
12 hours.
Might have only come out once in your lifetime.
I saw one that was like, it was all shit. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was like, mushrooms are amazing.
So we always like to talk mushrooms around here, and we'll continue that talk. In fact, maybe we'll do something along the lines later on and try and get that.
Yeah, we can get a mushroom guy in here.
We actually can. In fact, maybe we'll have Tanasi on, and we could have others. Everybody, this trilogy is a must have. Please give it. It's actually, what did we say a quad was again? Remember, because there's a fourth book now too.
Oh, the quadrilogy.
Quadrilogy. Anyway, whatever. There's four books now.
And I just looked because we got a lot of comments about that mushroom thing. It says that there's over 100,000 recognized species.
Yeah,
we did get about a dozen comments. Thank you, Juggernauts.
Thank you, guys. I love that. Speaking of that, wow, this really is a wonderful segue. I did want to mention, and this is going to be a regular part of our listener interaction. So we want questions from you guys. This is a call to action. Put them out there. Get them to Grambo. We just might answer you directly. And if we answer your question, we will shout you out directly.
Yes, sir. And that goes right here on YouTube. Leave them down in the comments below, or that's over at Instagram at JugDealers.
There was someone who wanted.
So right now we don't have any, but that's why the call to action.
It's funny because there was someone who commented on one of the last episodes, nutrient wise, and they had something they wanted us to cover in potassium. God, I hope we covered it. But if we didn't, reach back out to us.
Perfect opportunity.
We will happily go back over stuff.
Yes.
We have no shame.
If we screw something up, we'll go back.
It's not even if we screw something, we'd love to just tell people more. I love learning more. I love seeing more stuff and having people.
That, and we got about 1,500 new juggernauts this month listening to the podcast. So all you new guys, we're listening.
Oh yeah, we definitely. Yeah, no, we love educating and being educated. We're not going to take it.
And one of those things too. We'll continue to make sure, especially as the travel season picks back up next year. Making an effort to let you know where we're going to be out, try and interact with with us out on the road, things like that. We do have some shout outs that we want to do. Yeah. This is an important one, and I'll let you do this being who it is.
Well, the homie Eugene Monroe, as you know, we had him on an episode or two episodes really. And, guys, go treat yourselves to that second episode because that's the one where he talks about weed stuff. The first one he talked about sports stuff. The second one he talked about weed stuff. But he just had his it's not a new podcast. He's been filming it for a while, but
some episodes.
He's been amassing a ton of stuff. It's the Smoking Heroes podcast. It's totally awesome. He covers a ton of stuff. And not only that, he interviewed, his access to people to interview. He had Dead Prez on, and that I know he dropped some clips of that. He's had a ton of really cool people on his
I also
show.
And just to kind of give a little background on the Smoking Hero. So it's him and it's Leo, and Leo's a veteran. So it's got the sports element, it's got the veteran element, and it's all tied together with cannabis.
They talk about some cool stuff. They talk about all kinds of different topics. Eugene's the homie.
Oh, also, if you want a really badass dog, he's got Kush Doodles, and he just had a litter 13 or something.
Yeah, he's got some pups. For sure.
Did you say Kush Doodle?
Yeah, Kush Doodles is the name of. Yeah, that's the name of his dog.
I was gonna say I'll take a cut of some Kush Doodle.
Yeah, a lot of people want cuts of the Kush Doodle.
It's exclusive.
I want to give a shout out to Tony from HTG Roanoke. That's why we're wearing these Terp Farmer shirts and hats. He sent these out. Big supporter of Tony. Tony does some really cool stuff with veterans where he actually has a Beans for Boots program where he gives away seeds and grow equipment to veterans.
Very cool.
He himself is a veteran. Tony's a great guy. He's an organic farmer. He's from Vermont. He's extremely knowledgeable. I love going into that store, talking to him, talking to Eric. Those are the guys that really got us into Virginia. And I just love supporting those guys. So when he asked me if he could send us some shirts and hats, I was like, bro, any way I can support you, you're the homie. So shout out to Tony. Shout out to Eric, that whole squad.
You support us. We support you.
Fam.
And thank you for your service as well.
And dude, they bang that stuff in the store. All the guys behind the counter, if they're not running New Millennium exclusively, they're adding it to their gardens. I think even Tony, Mr. Super Organic guy, uses the Lightning Start and the Carbonaria, So those guys,
we
love you guys.
Find a way to
we appreciate Virginia's been huge for us this year. We love Virginia For sure.
Beautiful state.
Yeah, a lot of support from Virginia.
I hear it's for lovers.
It is for lovers.
I heard that.
It is for lovers.
I heard that.
We got some shop shout outs real quick. We want to shout out Box of Rain. Box of Rain is up in Montana. Those guys have been supporting us for years. So if you need anything in northwestern Montana, they are the homies to reach out to.
They are the homies. Give them a shout. Also, in fact, I wanted to put this.
I was going to say your stomping ground. I was going to let
so,
you.
I think it was actually my very first hydro shop, AHL Albuquerque Hydroponics.
I've been down there.
Still on Catherine. Still in the same place it's been for the last 20 years. Thank you, AHL. Thank you then, and thank you now.
And finally, we got Toledo Indoor Garden. That's over in Bees. Neck of the woods.
Yep, they've got several locations there in Ohio.
Now that Ohio is up and running and we got people excited to do things, for any of your needs in Ohio, step out to Toledo Indoor Garden. They will happily help you guys. If they don't have one of our products on the shelf,
they'll get it. No problem. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention their sister store, KC Grow Depot, in the wonderful town of Kansas City, Missouri. Technically Gladstone.
The home squad.
Yeah.
You always got to shout out the hometown.
That's right. I'll let you, again, this is one that we always like to do, and this is kind of a call to action as well. If you've got your harvest shots, you've got your nug shots, put them on there, tag Rambo, get us your shots. We'll pick one every week. We'll shout you out if we pick your pick.
We got a beautiful, this week, we have a beautiful picture from our good friend, Eugene Monroe. This is going to be grown with our Apex and UV lighting and New Millennium Nutrients, the full run.
We might have stacked the deck on this one. We might.
This is, and genetics. He's running the Dark Rainbow 2.0 from Fletch. He's got a bunch of different stuff in that room, but I really enjoyed the morphology and the greasiness of that Dark Rainbow. So we're going to throw a picture of that up. Shout out to Eugene, man. He's always been a big supporter, and we love being a big supporter of him. To wrap it up, we're going to do a little giveaway to some people. We got a new beanie. So all the beanies we had given away on the road previously were gray. We got black ones now.
Oh, they're pretty. So I was eyeballing them when I was walking through the office.
They're dope. So you can have a choice. As you can tell, we love black. So we're going to go with black. So we're going to do a beanie and a shirt. So you just got to tell us your shirt size. And then we're going to do a quarter ruby. So you reach out. We're going to figure out.
What are we going to do? We're going to do one and we're going to do two sets of those. What do you think?
Let's do two sets.
Let's do two sets. Let's do two sets.
Let's just keep it going as we always do. So just make sure you guys follow us at Jug Dealers on Instagram and at 58 on Instagram. Anybody that goes and we see in the next week that follows both those accounts, you automatically enter. No
Should we go ahead and have them put their shirt size on it right away preemptively? Huh?
You can, but if you win, I'll make sure to contact you directly.
That's why we keep this guy around.
The 58 crew got us set up. So we have a form I'll be sending to you guys. Just fill in all your address, everything. That makes sure it's all encrypted and safe on your end, not floating around Instagram, and we send it to you free of charge.
I'll tell you what, Grambo, maybe we do one giveaway.
Is he saying three? Is he?
Do we give? Well, how do we take care of an old listener? We don't want it to just be new listeners.
Well, that's a good point. We try to build up the Instagram just because the Instagram, they had an account before, got deleted. You guys know how cannabis and all.
I'll tell you what. Let's throw a third one in there. Grambo, you pick a random old listener.
All right.
And two new listeners.
I like it. Okay.
I like it.
I like it. We're doing three sets.
Two
new ones, one old one. We got you guys.
We love you guys.
Gabe the Fair. All hail Gabe the Fair.
All right, folks. Well, hey, come back and see us the next one. We're going to get into some shit probably.
The next episode,
sulfur, calcium.
I was going to say the next episode is actually should be Zach.
Oh yeah.
We got Zach. So the next episode, we got Zach from BioSafe coming in, and I guess it's hard to tell with the timing. This might drop before then, but recording wise, the next episode we got Zach from BioSafe. We're going to be talking lots of cool stuff from those with him, IPM, his experience in the cannabis industry, and all kinds of other stuff. So
we're going to be we're really trying to bring in people that bring in good knowledge. So make sure you turn in next time. We're going to do some IPM talk. Later, folks.
We love you guys. Peace.